Now that we've had a chance to get to know our hand position in number 10, let's dig a little bit deeper into the actual music. And what makes the music challenging in number 10 is also what's going to make it really interesting. Let's start with the first three measures, measures 1, 2, and 3. And the first thing you're going to notice about measures 1, 2, and 3 is that only the left hand is playing. Notice up here in the right hand, the only thing the right hand has are rests, which means that it's not going to be playing. Let me play for you that melody that the left hand plays in measures 1 through 3, and I'll actually continue on to the downbeat of measure 4 here, because you see there's just one note that finishes off that phrase. Now, in the next three measures, you'll notice for the most part it's only the right hand. Obviously, the left hand is playing on the downbeat of measure 4, but if we look at the rest of measures 4, 5, and 6, the left hand just has rests, and the right hand takes up the melody. So let me play for you the melody that you hear in measures 4 through 6, and then again, just extending a little bit into measure 7. Do you notice something similar between that melody that you hear in measures 1 through 3 in the left hand and the melody that you hear in measures 4 through 6 in the right hand? It's exactly the same melody. The only difference is the left hand is playing this melody in the octave below middle C, and the right hand is playing this melody in the octave above middle C. In a previous exercise, in one of the early exercises, we might have done this together in both hands at the same time. But that's not what Bartók gives us here. Instead, the left hand goes first, and then the right hand imitates the left hand. Except for this moment right here, we have sort of an overlap that happens on the downbeat of measure 4, where we have the last note of the phrase in the left hand and the first note of the phrase in the right hand. And it's these overlaps that always make one of the trickiest moments in this piece. If I put them together, you'll notice you'll hear like it's almost like the right hand interrupts the left hand. It comes in a little bit before the left hand is finished. And it's a really interesting effect that gives us a little bit of hint of a musical phenomenon that we're going to be encountering a little bit later on called counterpoint, or a polyphonic texture where we have more than one musical idea going on at the same time. You'll notice now this pattern of left hand and then right hand imitation continues on through almost the rest of the piece. In the next phrase that begins in measure 7, the left hand plays, and then in measure 10, the right hand answers or imitates. But again, we have this moment of overlap, both on the downbeat of measure 7 and then on the downbeat of measure 10. So even though these two hands are switching off focus, there's always a moment of overlap. So if I play, let me play from measure 1 all the way to the end of measure the beginning of measure 13. And in fact, you'll notice this pattern picks up and they come back together for those two notes at the very, very end, at the last beat of measure 23 into the first beat of measure 24. So it creates this really fascinating texture of the imitation going back and forth. And it's our first introduction to a musical technique that we're going to see a lot of, especially as we become more advanced pianists. As you're practicing this, make sure that you are, number one, working with your metronome, working slowly, and then particularly paying attention to all of these places where the phrases overlap. Those are always going to be the trickiest places. Sometimes the phrases overlap on the same notes. Sometimes it's the same note. For instance, in the downbeat of measure 4, the left hand ends on a D and the right hand begins on a D. But look over here in measure 7, the left hand begins on an F and the right hand ends on a D. So we have to keep track of these two different things. This piece is, it seems in some ways very simple, but it's a huge leap for us. Bartók is really asking us to think about our left and our right hand as completely separate musical entities in a way that he has not done yet.